hey Phil, can you build a retro gaming PC with these two mystery items and then share a game that you're really passionate about? Okay, so wow, we have the Roland MT-32. It's been a while since we've used this in a project on this channel, so I'm really excited. And what else have we got? Oh my, it's the AMD Athlon 64. So yeah, I think this will be interesting. So let's have a look at what we can do. Here we have all the parts, and you know the slogan, slow is good. We're dealing with really old games. Many of them are speed sensitive. So once the system is up and running, we will try to slow it down as much as we can. The main board is an Asus A8V for socket 939. We have 256 megabytes of RAM. This is the smallest capacity module I could find. For the graphics, we have a GeForce 4 MX 440. That's all we need under DOS. Compatibility is pretty decent. It outputs in DVI and it will scale everything to 1080p. Some games don't like the 60 Hz refresh rate, and also the output is a little bit on the soft side. So for actually playing games, you want to use the VGA output. For the storage, we have a USB floppy emulator, the GoTech. So we can boot from a boot disk and then format, partition and make the storage bootable. We have a 32 GB SSD together with the StarTech SATA to ID adapter. We also need a Midi cable. This plugs into the game port and it gives you Midi in and Midi out. And this is the Athlon 64. It's a 3800 plus running at 2.4 GHz with 512 kilobytes of level 2 cache. The machine turned on just fine and I'm installing MS-DOS from a boot, floppy drive, partitioning and formatting the disk, and then I connect the SSD to a modern computer and copy over the DOS files, benchmarks, some games and some utilities. Next, we're using the DOS benchmark pack. You can download that from my website, and resources, download links are down below in the video description. So out of the box, this machine is fast. For example, in Quake at 320 by 200, we're getting 229 FPS. And at 640 by 480, we're getting 83.3 FPS. So this machine is way too fast for our project. To slow the machine down, we start with disabling the cache. There is Gerwin's set mul utility. It can do a lot of things, but the main purpose of this program is to disable the CPU cache. And then I'm running the 3D bench benchmark. I have a good idea of what the results mean. We're getting 49. That is way too fast. Still, that's on the level of a decent 486 DX2. So now we head into the BIOS and I will lower the CPU multiplier, but this is also a good opportunity to lower the voltage. Here we have the machine in Windows and we can see Cool and Quiet in action. The multiplier is going down to 6x with a voltage of around 1.1. So I'm dialing in those settings in the BIOS, and 3D Bench is now 39.9. Now in the BIOS, I can see there is a 4x setting to lower the clock speed even further, but the machine wouldn't post with that setting. Now, I forgot the name, but one of you mentioned in a previous video to change the HT frequency. That's the hyper transport bus. So I'm going into the options and I'm lowering that to 200 megahertz. And yes, now the machine boots. Let's have a look at 3D Bench, 30.4. We need to slow it down even more. Let's change the RAM frequency. Out of the box, it runs at 200 megahertz. Let's slow it down to 100 megahertz. And now look at that, 25.4. That is already pretty good. There's one more thing we can do, and that is the memory timings. At first, I lowered the memory timings for every single parameter, but the machine wouldn't post. So I'm trying again, and I'm just changing the first 4 parameters. Those are the ones, the classic memory timings. I'm setting the lowest timings, and now we get a 3D Bench score of 21.8, and that is pretty decent. To put that into perspective, a 386 running at 40 megahertz gets a score of around 15. So this is still a little bit on the high side, but it's not too bad. We're looking at the performance of a very basic 486, maybe running at 25 megahertz. So now we have a machine that's working. The speed is slowed down nicely. I tested a few games, no crashes, everything is working. And at the moment I'm only getting the PC speaker sound. I plugged in a little speaker onto the header. So we need something to connect the Roland MT-32. We need a Midi interface. So one option is with a PCI sound card. However, in the BIOS, under the resources, I saw a sound card, onboard sound card, but also a game port and a Midi device mentioned. But if we look at the back of the motherboard, there is no game port here. So I looked around on the motherboard and there's a header here. It's right here, and that mentions game. So this must be the game port. I kept all the parts that came with this motherboard, like the manual and the driver disk and the I/O shield, but I didn't have that specific game port cable. So I looked into my boxes of goodies and I found this adapter. So it gives you 2 USB ports. Here's the game port and it has some connectors at the other end. And yeah, I was really surprised. I actually did not expect this to work, but it does without any drivers. So this is a hardware MIDI port and it worked beautifully. The Roland MT-32 requires a very unique MIDI interface. It needs intelligent mode support. And unfortunately, most sound cards, including what we have on this motherboard, doesn't support intelligent mode. And this is another situation where the community is so fantastic. We have a project called Soft MPU. It is developed by 2 users, BJT and Eliander. You run the program, you specify the port, which is 330, and off we go. We now have intelligent mode compatibility. Soft MPU works pretty well, but it requires some processing power. So once you slow down the machine to a level of a 386 or 486, you will notice in many games that send MIDI signals to the MT-32 to reprogram the effects, so to speak. This will take much longer than on a real intelligent mode MIDI interface. So just keep that in mind. The game we're testing today, especially in the beginning, you will have to wait like a minute or 2 for the upload to complete. And now I have a beautiful game I want to share and introduce to you. It is The Heart of China. And this is a point and click adventure game. So in this video, I will only show footage from the beginning, because if I show images from later, then there's not much reason to play this game. So this game launched in 1991 by Dynamics, and wow, this company has a huge legacy of awesome games. I had a look at their release history and they started really early. In 1984, for example, Stellar 7 for the Commodore 64. Most of the early games used 3D graphics. Games like Arctic Fox or Sky Fox 2, F-14 Tomcat. In the late 80s, we started to get games for DOS. For example, The Train Escape from Normandy, a very unique game. We also got Abrams Battle Tank and Mech Warrior, which, yeah, this is the first version released in 1989 for DOS, and other games like A-10 Tank Killer and Ghostbusters too. So they did a heap of variety of games. Rise of the Dragon was, I believe, their first point-and-click adventure game, released in 1990. Then we got The Adventures of Willy Beamish and The Heart of China, launched in 1991. When you launch the game, it says Dynamics, part of the Sierra family. This is because in 1990, Sierra bought Dynamics. This is a game I never really played until now. I actually beat this game just a few days ago. I was living in Austria, going to school, and we had the Mediamarkt, which is, yeah, a big market for electronics, and they also had a computing section with various 386 machines on display. And yeah, whoever was in charge there, they installed games on these computers like Indianapolis 500, Wing Commander, and also the heart of China. And back then the graphics were absolutely amazing with digitized graphics of real people. And the graphics haven't aged well. I'm playing with a modern LCD display, you get the chunky pixels, but back then you would have a 14 or 15 inch CRT monitor and the graphics would look much nicer. They used real actors which they photographed with hand-painted backgrounds. Basically very high production value, but of course you have a budget, so most of the actors were staff and their relatives. In the user manual, in the introduction, Jeff Tunnell, he mentions that they had to rework the artwork twice on 2 occasions to blend in together. So most of the production schedule and budget seems to have been gone into the graphics. In terms of audio, you can play with the plain PC speaker, but it's a very boring experience. The Sound Blaster is much better, or Adlib. I don't think there's too much of a difference in this game. And at the high end, if you experience this game with the Roland MT-32, it sounds absolutely beautiful. In the manual, it mentions that this game will take you on a whirlwind, globe-spanning adventure that captures the flavor and romance of exotic locations and characters. I have showcased this game many times and it's a go-to game I test with compatibility in mind. If your machine is too fast, for example, it won't initialize your sound card. And yeah, finally, I got to sit down, print out all the documentation and really play this one. I bought the game on GOG and it's a really good release. Initially, in the old days, it was bundled with DOSBox. Now it's packaged with Scum VM, but in the extras folder, you can find the DOS executable and play it on a real retro PC. The documentation, they are scanned really well in good quality. You get a user manual, a reference card, a travel guide and a hint book. Many point and click adventures you can basically just start and off you go. You know exactly what to do. But this one is not quite like it. It can be a little bit confusing as to what you have to do. I highly recommend that you read all the manuals. It explains a lot and it also sets the mood for this game and gives you a few hints in the beginning. They make a big deal about this game not being linear. Well, it sort of is still very linear, but there are multiple plot paths. And with the Heart of China, they introduced this concept of a story branch alert. So when you try something in the game and then you get this warning, branch alert, it's telling you that you could have done something different to get maybe a different outcome. But that mechanic is a little bit confusing because it doesn't really tell you what you did. Was that good or was it bad? Did you miss out on an item? So I kind of like what they were trying to do, but in reality, it doesn't work too well. So in the end, most of the game is still very linear. There are a couple of puzzles you can solve in different ways, but it really doesn't make me want to replay it again. Time plays a big part in this game. The longer you take to complete the game, the less money you make. So every day that passes, you lose $20,000 of your budget. And a lot in the game depends on how you communicate with the characters. And that can be a little bit annoying. With some of the characters, you have to be really polite, but with other ones, you have to be really aggressive to get the good outcome. So it's a lot of trial and error. The good news is you can save frequently. I think over 20 save files, and if you're full, you can add another path and save some more games. The game is actually really short, and what I think happened is they spent so much time on the acting and the art and getting all those hand-painted backgrounds going that there wasn't much time left for the game. So they added this branching to add the perception of additional value. But once you figured out all the options, I think you can finish this game in 20 minutes or half an hour. So it is really a very short game. The story involves you traveling from Hong Kong to Paris, and there's Hong Kong, Chengdu, Kathmandu, Istanbul, then there's the Orient Express and finally Paris. However, the Orient Express in Paris, there's nothing you're doing there. In the Orient Express, there's just a scene where you communicate, and Paris is the final destination. So really, it's just a handful of locations. There are 2 arcade sequences in the game, the Chengdu tank sequence and the Orient Express train battle. Both of them are speed sensitive, especially the tank battle on the machine that's too fast. It's impossible to control. You can skip those sequences, however, because they can be quite tricky and frustrating. So if you don't want to play them, just choose to skip and you can continue with the adventure game. A few tips to play the game: to find the hotspots of objects that you can interact with. Just press the tab key on the keyboard. It will cycle through all the hotspots, and also read the manual about how you can equip your character with the gun and how to shoot it. That's a game mechanic that a lot of people weren't quite sure how to do that, and I could read in the GOG forum that there's one sequence where you have to shoot the gun, and a lot of people seem to get stuck in that aspect. All in all, what are my thoughts on this game? Well, in a way, I'm a little bit disappointed, and also with the nostalgia in mind. Yeah, now you open the box, you know what the reality is. So some of the imaginations that I had of this game, yeah, now it's reality. Not quite what I was hoping for. It's not a terrible game. The graphics are really the highlight, and the Roland MT-32 music is also absolutely beautiful. But in terms of point and click adventure games, they're much better games from Sierra and LucasArts. You can play this game happily on DOSBox with the MUNT MT-32 emulator, and then you can also activate the perfect pixel scaling and even use an overlay to get a CRT effect to make it look like a CRT monitor. So you're not missing out too much, but of course it's a different experience playing it on a retro PC with a nice CRT monitor and having the real sound card to play through your vintage retro gaming PC. So this was a fun project, slowing down the Athlon 64 and connecting it with a Roland MT-32. A couple of years back I would have never thought that that's possible. But yeah, it seems if you find a Midi or game port on a motherboard, that's a real option to connect some vintage Midi devices. And unlike with general Midi, the Roland MT-32, most games that support it use it for music and sound effects. It was only with, I believe, Wing Commander 2, or maybe a few other games around that era, where the concept of supporting 2 sound devices became prevalent. There are many games that support the MT-32. It's not just the big titles from Sierra, LucasArts and Origin. There are many games, even less well-known games, that support it. So there's actually a huge library of games that you can experience with such a machine. For this project it wasn't necessary, but I believe on some motherboards you can slow it down even further. Inside the VIA chipset there is some sort of a duty cycle feature that you can activate. Maybe that's something we'll look at in a future video to slow it down even more, but a early 486 is already pretty decent in terms of DOS compatibility. The Heart of China, well, this game will still hold a special place in my heart. It kinda didn't turn out what I was hoping for. The graphics are beautiful, the sound is amazing, the music is fantastic, but the gameplay is a little bit on the boring side. Maybe in the future I will play it again, try out some of those different paths, but I already got the happy ending in the end. There are different endings. That's quite a modern concept actually, so depending on what options you choose when you communicate with the characters and your actions, you can get different endings. So that's quite novel, but I already got the happy ending in the end, so I'm pretty happy. And now I want to hear from you. What is your take on the Roland MT-32, and were you surprised by what you saw here, or is that something you already knew is possible? And what are your thoughts on the Heart of China and games from that period, as well as, yeah, more love for point and click adventure games. I really enjoy that genre back in the day. Yeah, I had a few consoles like the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy. I could almost never finish any of these games, like jump and run games. It's just not my thing. They're just too hard. But when point and click adventures came out and Wing Commander on the PC, that was my time. Finally, I could, yeah, have enjoyed games with some puzzles. There was no timer or fast reaction time. You could enjoy the atmosphere. And yeah, the games were mostly in English. So at the time we had some English in school, but it was very basic English. So I would have a dictionary and, you know, translate some of the vocabulary. And yeah, I really have fond memories of that time. It's a genre. You can still get some modern point and click adventure games, but it's definitely a very small niche. There you go. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, yeah, please stick around, subscribe. We work with old computers to enjoy classic games, bring back happy memories, but I also help you out to build your own retro PC. So in the video description, you will find resources, downloads, for example, how to set up the DOS boot menu or the DOS benchmark pack to make it easier for you to get up and running. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I shall see you soon with another one.